Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a very special episode of OpenShift TV. I'm joined by the one and only Joe Fitzgerald, the VP and GM of Management at the Business Unit. This is our In the Clouds with Redhead Leadership series. Joe, would you like to introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Joe Fitzgerald, as Chris said. I run the management and automation businesses here at Red Hat. I'm super excited to join you. My background, I've spent over 35 years in IT, mostly in the area of management. So I've seen a couple of different generations and a couple of different paradigm shifts, and looking forward to the next one here.
Yeah, a couple paradigm shifts. Yeah, there's been so much change in the industry, especially this year. And Ansible and ACM, Advanced Cluster Management, are both under your purview, right? So there's a lot of automation there. And you said it the other day. I'm gonna steal your thunder a little bit, and you said that Forrester called automation a boardroom topic, right? Like I can't remember what the exact quote was, but like automation is now key in the circumstances that we're in the world. So how have you seen 2020 kind of evolve from where we were in January to where we are now in November? I'm super curious.
Yeah, 2020 is, I would call it the year of people adapting.
Yeah.
Right. To a new normal, right? We'll see how much of that stays and what the new normal will be next year. Hopefully it'll be better than this year in a lot of ways. But automation has been growing even pre-2020. 2020 was sort of like an accelerant, right? Where we're just seeing automation take off. And it's funny, we have thousands of customers, that are using Ansible. And when we talk to them, it's funny, each one has a different automation perspective. Some are trying to automate their traditional IT so they can move people and, resources to doing the new digital transformation, stuff. Other people are already, on the digital transformation side, and they're trying to accelerate. Other people just have, simple things like access problems, or don't have enough staff, or have, time to market challenges that drives automation. So it's pervasive, but the stories are different, across each enterprise.
Yeah, the stories I'm sure vary because we're talking about such a wide swath. We were talking before we joined, right? Like from the IT help desk all the way up to the senior architect, right? Like if they're doing a repetitive task, they seriously need to consider automating it because those tasks are just time sucks, right? Like it's just going to take more away. Yeah, you got to invest a little up front, but that down payment is quickly paid off in the long run, right? Because now you can focus on the more complex problems facing your organization, like how do you deal with the situation that we're in? So, I'm a huge fan of Ansible, right? Like I've used it since, 2013, 2014, I think, right? Like I remember Ansible Fest pre-acquisition kind of deal, right? So, I always ask people, like, how did you first become involved, not just with Ansible or Kubernetes, but like, how did you become involved with Red Hat? Like not as an employee, but as a consumer or customer. And I think in your case, you have a very unique situation.
Yeah, my journey with Red Hat, if you will, sort of like, Red Hat's sort of like the Kevin Bacon of IT, you know what I mean? Where everybody's sort of got a Red Hat connection, right?
Mm-hmm.
My sort of journey was, I would say, well over 15 years ago, we were using RHEL, Red Hat Enterprise Linux, to develop and test software on, like a lot of people, right? And we had a lot of customers who were running in production, so that was our target platform, right, for some of the software we were developing. Then about 10 years ago, I founded a startup around management, right, because that's the area that I've been in, and we were a Red Hat partner. So then I dealt with Red Hat as a go-to-market partner, which was another sort of facet. And then 8 years ago, actually 8 years ago in a couple of weeks here in December, Red Hat acquired the company that I found, ManageIQ, and I joined Red Hat. And at the time, Red Hat didn't have a management business unit. They had management software, they had satellite, they had a number of technologies. But over those years, we've really looked at management and automation focused on hybrid clouds. And Ansible showed up on my radar pretty early, and ended up bringing Ansible in through acquisition about 5 years ago. So it's been an interesting journey at Red Hat over the past, it goes back 15 plus years, but at Red Hat for 8 years.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, and there's that acquisition 5 years ago. I feel like was a very pivotal moment for Red Hat because it became not just about the OS and managing the OS because Ansible could do so much, right? Like cloud management, network management, storage management, whatever you want, right? Like it opened up so many opportunities. What do we do to make sure that it was a success like it has been, in my opinion? You've gone through quite a few acquisitions, I think, and the things that we did to make Ansible successful, like what were those steps like? I'm sure there was some missteps, but what do you think were the good things that we did to bring Ansible on board?
It's a great question. And so at last count, I think I've been acquired at least 5 times. And history shows a lot of acquisitions don't work well, right? There's culture clashes, there's expectation gaps, there's all sorts of challenges. With Ansible, I was determined, since I was the person driving the acquisition. I remember asking the Red Hat senior management to acquire Ansible. And so I felt like I was not only responsible to Red Hat for the success, but also for the company and the people that were Ansible and the technology. And so we had a couple of advantages. There were a number of ex-Red Hat folks. It was culturally compatible with Red Hat, so that was a good starting point. Location-wise, they were close to Red Hat facility in North Carolina in Raleigh. They're in Durham. We have facilities in Raleigh, so close. But it's more than that. A lot of times in the acquisitions I've been through, they start changing things almost immediately out of the gate. Let's take this thing apart. We love this thing you've built. Now let's take it apart, right? And move it into different teams here and split it up. And whatever the magic was and whatever that thing was that you acquired, it becomes sort of disassembled like a transmission. And when they go to put it back together, they're like, what's this gear? What's that gear? And so with Ansible, we were determined not to screw it up, both from a company culture as well as from a community point of view. So Ansible was a small company, right? When we acquired it 5 years ago, it had a sort of young but excited community about it.
I was part of it.
Yeah. So you saw the early days, but over the past 5 years, the last 4 years, Ansible has been in the top 10 open source projects based on the number of contributors.
Yeah, it's amazing.
I would say, we didn't screw it up, right? From a community point of view, we've actually been trying to catalyze, facilitate work with the community in a way that has seen this huge proliferation of automation. Ansible has expanded into so many domains: networking, security. We're moving towards edge, where we've instrumented it into all these different ways to invoke automation. That's important too. But from the community side, it did very well. From a sort of a corporate side, like how we integrated it inside Red Hat, it wasn't perfect. No acquisition's ever perfect, but it was pretty good in terms of making sure that we listened to the people who came over from Ansible, since they knew it, the business. Integrating it we've integrated it to a lot of the different technology areas inside Red Hat.
Oh yeah.
Most recently, you mentioned advanced cluster management. But we've done a lot of integration and a lot of work, and I think the success is self-evident if you look at some of the stats.
Well, I think one of the coolest things we did as a company here at Red Hat was when we made Insights, was that like we gave people like, here's what's wrong, but also here's potentially a playbook that could fix it, right? Like it's not just like identifying problems, right? Like any number of tools could identify a problem. It's the identifying the problem with the knowledge that we have here at Red Hat, and then giving you, the expert produced playbook to fix it. Like that, I think was one of the coolest like integrations between two things, because we're taking like data and then giving people the fix at the same time. And oftentimes like some of these bugs and issues that Insights picks up, it's changing settings, not installing packages, right? Like it's very, very complex things that we're asking people to do to get work around bugs between like Oracle database and Red Hat Enterprise Linux kind of thing. And to hand someone a playbook to fix those things is just an amazingly powerful thing, in my opinion, because that playbook can be considered trusted to an extent, right? Like it's coming from Red Hat. And yeah, I can take that playbook and adopt it to my environment, but like I'm going to have a solid foundation to do that with.
Yeah, I think a couple of comments about that. First of all, for those of you who don't know what Redhead Insights is, basically it's a SaaS service that we offer that there's no cost, right, for our subscribers. Basically, what it does is it analyzes RHEL systems to determine their configuration settings, software patches, things like that, and then basically either tells people what they need to fix, change, or what their risk profile and their potential for challenges to the environment, and then we can either tell you about it, or as you just mentioned, we can drive an Ansible playbook. Now, I want to separate those two thoughts for a second. One of the things I think that is a sort of paradigm shift that's occurred and is continuing to occur is what I'll call composable management. What the hell is composable management? Think of a DevOps tool chain.
Right.
It's not a monolithic, one size fits all. You go to a vendor and you buy the DevOps thing and you just snap it in and you turn it on and give it to people, right?
As many vendors that try, it's not.
So what are people doing? They have a tool chain. Right. What is a tool chain? It's a collection of different tools that do different things along the process of building and integrating and testing applications and deploying, right? And even within the same organization, you may have different tools. The point is that you can unplug one tool. If you don't like your current version control system, you can unplug it and plug in another one. Right. And the rest of your tool chain is still relatively intact. I call that composable management. It's a lot different than the old days when you would go to a big vendor and they go, here's your intergalactic management suite, and it does everything.
Right.
Hope you enjoy it, and you're going to be our customer for the next 40 years. Now it's about Darwinism. Now it's about, if I'm not happy with my monitoring tool or my version or my testing system, I can go swap in another one, and I don't have to change my entire world in order to do that. So getting back to Ansible, Ansible is very composable. It does automation. When do I want to do automation? Well, if you had a tool like Insights or other tool that looked at systems and analyzed and said, oh my God, this system is insecure, or it could be optimized, or it's using too many resources, whatever it is, I need to automate some change to that system. Call Ansible, right? Yeah. People use Ansible in their DevOps tool chains, but a lot of operational teams use Ansible for a whole set of operational issues. And the other dynamic there is because it's composable, keep expanding what it can do. We've seen a lot of people adopt it as a standard now. It used to be balkanized. You'd have enterprises have dozens of automation tools. They always did. One for networking, one for storage, one for compute, one for account, all different things. And so now what's happened is there's now a tool that can automate across these different domains. Well, wow, what does that mean? That means I can now have a person who understands how to automate across domain. And that's a pretty useful person today.
Oh, yeah.
World where you're trying to adapt to do things fast. I don't have to, I'm the storage guy, call the network guy, I need changes. Okay, call the, the other guy to add accounts for me. Oh, call the cloud guy because I need to do something else. It's the same guy now.
Yeah. Same person. I think that very much rings true, because I remember right before I switched from the Ansible team over to the OpenShift team, it was very much, I was seeing the world through Ansible lenses, right? Like that bespoke IPMI device that I needed to talk to, that weird switch hanging out over here, that cloud service hanging out over there. I just went to the Ansible module and I would read the doc and I'd be like, okay, I understand how this thing works. Just reading the documentation from Ansible about the cloud native service or the cloud thing or the storage thing or whatever. And I could very much feel pretty confident about what I was doing, because I knew, obviously I wasn't deleting things. I was, updating or maintaining or, changing things, but I wasn't, doing anything destructive. So I knew that Ansible was going to do that in a safe way, right? Like the modules are, written and tested and so forth, so that I can trust that it's going to do what I tell it to do. And that includes the entire module suite, right? Like potentially thousands. And now the modules are collections, and, there was a whole decision behind that. You want to talk about Ansible collections at all, or?
Sure. Yeah. Let me talk a little bit about the sort of the parts and pieces, because I think it's important, right? I talked about composable management at a high level. One of the reasons I think the Ansible community has been so successful and why the automation has proliferated is because it's modular. You can add an Ansible module, as you know, that integrates into, people have done, smart light bulbs or gas meters or all sorts of strange devices. Why? Because it doesn't have to put an agent on it, just needs a network connection. And second of all, because I can write a module in Ansible that's very bound in terms of the scope of what I need to add to write that module. I don't have to, compile a system with 8,000 modules and hope everything is all, correct and everything else. I can focus on my one module that may just integrate to my system through an API. And now I've just taught Ansible how to talk to my thing, my software, my hardware, my network, whatever. And so I've just extended the Ansible universe. And I don't need to know the rest of the Ansible universe, but I've just added my part. And so now I've added to the sort of the automation, universe, if you will. So where does sort of Red Hat come in? How does Red Hat sort of add value in there? Well, communities are awesome at innovation and collaboration and really extending the universe. When you take that automation, whether it's the modules that integrate into different APIs and software and hardware and things like that, or the playbooks, right, that actually describe what kind of automation you want to do, or the roles or the other parts and pieces, you can just go out to the community and go, pull stuff out and say, geez, I've got a lot of time on my hands, and I'm just doing this for myself. Hey, I'm going to go grab this stuff. It's awesome. If you're an enterprise in a regulated industry with a global distributed environment, whatever, and you go, wow,
regulatory, everything's out the wazoo. Yeah.
I'd like to know what people are running, right? Especially if they're touching network devices and firewalls and ports. We integrate into security systems. We can create accounts. We can do all sorts of things across many, many different domains. That's the power of it. But you want to make sure that you have certified, curated content. I distinguish between, I'll call it, community-grade automation and enterprise-grade automation. Okay? What I use in my house to turn on the lights in my room or to play music on a smart speaker or something, that's awesome. If I'm in healthcare and I've got to deal with privacy, or I'm in financial services and I've got to deal with 17 layers of regulations and things like that, or if I'm in a manufacturing environment and someone could get hurt if the wrong software settings, sensors, or whatever are not attenuated, I'm thinking that I probably want enterprise grade automation. And so what we've been doing is we have been taking the automation that the community and Red Hat develop, and we've been moving them into certified collections, right? And it's a coherent, curated, sane, certified, supported set of automation that you can count on. And if you have a problem with it, or if it breaks, or if there's a security exposure, we're going to tell you, we're going to update it, we're going to support you. So it's sort of the old Red Hat mantra of, sort of tried, trusted, and tested kind of thing. Yeah. That's the level of automation. So I guess with great automation comes great responsibility, to borrow a phrase. We're trying to help people with that.
Yeah, I can't think of, like, you just went through a number of scenarios, right, from healthcare to manufacturing, and like I've been in those, like, as an ops person in those scenarios, right? And one of those scenarios where manufacturing was the case, right? Like they had dashboards to monitor all this equipment, and some of this equipment would get to like 4,000 degrees Celsius, so right, like incredibly dangerous, right? High pressures, high temperatures, all this stuff. But they were managing everything like one by one on, everything was this bespoke thing. And it was just like, how do you know when something changes, right? Like, how long does it take for you to see the update? And it was like minutes. And it's like, if something's exploding, I kind of want to know now, not later, right? Like, because, we were, hundreds of thousands, not thousands, maybe thousands of feet away from the actual manufacturing facility monitoring these things. So having consistency across the board made tremendous difference in how we monitored all these weird kind of, manufacturing pieces of equipment. But Ansible gave us that flexibility to do it. And if we didn't have it, I definitely feel like there would have been a lot more issues in the long term.
So now look around the corner. Edge is coming. 5G is here and coming. What does that mean? You're going to have orders of magnitude more devices running more software, connecting across more diverse network conditions, that are going to require security, settings, applications, all sorts of updates, right? And so it's essential that in that environment that you have automation that scales, that is reliable, that can handle the diversity of devices, network connections, hardware and software. So Ansible is going to have a big role to play in edge automation, and that's a big area that we're pushing on. And again, it's going to challenge even people that are running the best, highest levels of automation in a traditional IT environment. Now you add another comma and some zeros onto the end of the number of devices, and the number of software versions and OS patches and certificates and all the other things that have to happen to make everything run smoothly. And you're going to even have more reliance on automation.
I mean, just certificate management, right? Like, what was it? Send to Kindle.amazon.com's certificate expired the other day. And there was all these people on Twitter like, hey, why can't I do this? The cert expired, so app didn't work anymore. It's just like things like that are just, they're bound to happen. So automate it when you put it in place, right? And we were talking before I joined, and I was telling you, right, like my Ford Escape updates in the garage overnight. And I know that thing has thousands of sensors in it to test everything because like it displays some of that data to me, but I also know it's keeping some of that data and then processing it and, making some deterministic, data available about like when you should change your air filter, or when you should change your oil, so forth, so on, right? And, I want to bring that data in, or I want to update that thing. Like that thing is always moving around. It's very rare that that thing is holding still and connected to the internet and so forth, so on. But like my car actually updates its software routinely in my garage overnight, right? Like that's a Ford. That's not a Tesla or some brand new fancy car, right? Like that's a Ford. We have to start thinking about everything as having all kinds of knobs and switches to flip, because that's the reality of the situation, is that one of these days there's going to be so many devices, IPv6, right? Like there's going to be so many devices out there that are addressable and configurable. There's no way one human will be able to manage like their own devices, let alone, an enterprise worth of devices.
Yeah, it's funny too. I think that not only is there going to be a proliferation, I mean, you're talking, millions or billions of devices, right, are going to be connected up, across different things. Consumer, business, environmental. There's going to be all sorts of opportunities for automation. The other thing I think that's happening is, in the old days, last year before, if you talk to somebody about edge, they would think about a smaller system on a constrained network with, small
like
amount
an AC unit in the field somewhere, kind of thing, right? Yeah.
Small everything, small network, small, compute, small storage, small app set, stuff like that. 5G speeds are blistering, right? And so it's going to change the amount of network bandwidth available, right, to talk to and configure these devices. By the way, these devices are generating a ton of data that's got to be filtered, sifted, managed, collected, exchanged. You have models going down, right? So there's a whole AI, into this. Like, what do I do with all the data? How do I control, and automate that flow? But these devices are not tiny devices on a tiny network with little capacity. These are becoming, multi-app, fat pipe, decent horsepower systems. And so what does that mean? That means more apps, right? More settings, more, things that have to be managed and automated. And I think that's, every infrastructure or software paradigm shift has had a corresponding management paradigm shift. I quip it's Fitzgerald's law. You know what I mean? You change it, I'll see you with new management. You want to change the application delivery process, I'll see you with new management. So it's an evergreen, area. And I think Ansible has the sort of the staying power because of its simplicity, modularity, agentless nature to survive the next couple of paradigm shifts, because it is the right size, piece in terms of the composable management.
I agree. And it will adapt as quickly as 5G will force us, right? Because the community will respond in kind, and Red Hat will as well. This is a question I always get, and I think it'll be a unique question for you specifically, given some changing of things behind the scenes. You know, I always like to ask our leadership the same question: how has the IBM acquisition impacted you and the business unit, the management business unit?
So as I mentioned earlier, I've been acquired at least 5 times, maybe 5.5, depending on, or 6. So, I was involved in the IBM integration with Red Hat. There's always, sort of a concern whenever an acquisition occurs, whether you're being acquired, like we were with IBM, or whether we were acquired, like in the case of Ansible, or when I was acquired at ManageIQ and other companies. So I think IBM did a really good job at sort of the same philosophy that we took to the much smaller Ansible acquisition, which is, sort of the Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm, right? Red Hat, Red Hat, separate company, still all open source. The sort of the Red Hat philosophy of how we develop software, how we work in communities and in the open, none of that has changed. IBM has not perturbed one aspect of that, which is amazing.
If anything, they bolstered it, right? Like,
yeah. And so, at first, I think there was a fair amount of skepticism. Oh, you're going to do this and you're going to do that. At this point, over a year later, I think you can pound the table and go, see, we did what we said. I also here's a tell as well. The fact that Paul Cormier is still here.
Yeah.
And the CEO of Red Hat, Jim's over at IBM.
Jim's the president of IBM. Like, that's a big deal.
We may be changing them as opposed to them changing us, right?
Right.
But Paul, who drove the Red Hat, product, technology strategy for 2 decades, is doing it at the CEO level now for Red Hat. With the same philosophy and the same experience, and IBM has embraced, encouraged, and supported that. So if anything, it's added more sort of fuel and energy to the Red Hat system. Similar to what we did with Ansible. If Ansible was a smaller standalone company, they would have had a different journey. Some of their code wasn't open, right? So
that's true. Yeah.
It would have been a different journey for them, for customers, for all the different environments. Okay, and so the fact that IBM has let Red Hat be Red Hat.
Yes.
And encouraged it. And I think they've proven at this point to the world that they are going to do that. And so look at the senior people that are here. Look at the business that we do. IBM is like a partner for us, right? We deal with many other partners. So I would say they're letting Red Hat be Red Hat.
I concur. And, I point directly at several things now, right? Like a lot of my friends, when it first happened, were like, oh, you're sticking around? I was like, yeah. Why would I leave Red Hat? I like it here, A lot of my friends are like, well, we'll see you in 2 years. And I'm looking at the clock and the calendar and I'm like, a lot of stuff would have to change in the next few months for like that 2-year thing to pay off, right, for them. So it's kind of like, yeah, I stuck around for good reasons, right? Like Red Hat has pretty much been untouched. But I think one of the coolest things that IBM did, like very early on, I feel like, was moving the MCM crew, the Advanced Cluster Management team, over to Red Hat. And the way we handled that, as like putting them through new hire orientation and treating them as like, hey, welcome to Red Hat, the new company, right? Like your new employer kind of thing. But very much still working with our IBM team. I thought that was so cool in how that was done. Would you like to speak to that?
Yeah, no, that's another interesting dynamic, which is, a lot of times the direction when you are acquired, right, is the acquiring company starts sort of breaking parts off, right? That's part of the disassembly. It's like, hey, you've got this great thing. Let's move it into the department, or the organization here that works on that thing or is craving that thing. In this case, IBM actually went the other way and said, you know what? We have some technology here that is actually a better fit with the Red Hat portfolio, and it should be built in the open, right? And it should grow in this environment So they actually moved the team and the technology over to the Red Hat side, and we're in the process of open sourcing it, just like we were open sourcing the private code that Ansible had.
Yeah.
Right. So we're being Red Hat about this. But I thought that was another, incredible proof point that IBM said, hey, look, this is, we could have kept it on our side and, kept it blue and, done whatever, but we think it's a much better for the open community, for innovation, for what's going on in advancing these container environments. They pushed it to the red side and into the open. So that team's fantastic, by the way. If you want to talk about technology that was built from scratch, on Kubernetes, for Kubernetes, with deep Kubernetes experience. That's one of the things that, as sort of composable management, that integrates to OpenShift and federates OpenShift clusters. Basically, looks at, controls cluster lifecycle management activities. It looks at policy and governance. It looks at application deployment. You can do it based on policy and tags. Really powerful stuff. We plugged Ansible into that, working with that team. So we extended Ansible in a way that, look, at the right point in time when something happens, invoke an Ansible playbook. Why is that important? Most of the conversation we've had today about Ansible has been around the technical side of Ansible. Go integrate with storage or network or security or something.
Yeah.
There's a whole other set of Ansible integration that maybe is not so exciting, which is go open up a change ticket. Go change the CMDB. Go do something to the systems of record that has to track what's going on in this highly dynamic environment. And we have a ton of customers doing that in all different ways. And so what we did was we said, well, can we make this easy? Can we make it easy to plug in these Legos, these automation Legos at the right place during the processing of these environments, whether you're deploying new apps, deploying new infrastructure, changing policies and settings and things like that. Can we actually make it easier? And we worked with the ACM team to do that. And wow, we showed that at Ansible Fest. And I'll tell you, people are like, wow, that's exactly what I was looking for. So again, one of those areas where we're extending automation into a domain, in this case, OpenShift and Kubernetes, but also the instrumentation. One other comment about that. When we acquired Ansible 5 years ago, their main product, their flagship product, was Ansible Tower.
Yes.
Okay. It was private. It was an open core model. The rest of the stuff was open source. Tower was closed. We open sourced it. But what we've done is we've extended Ansible in so many ways in how you invoke automation. Most recently, in addition to ACM at Ansible Fest, we demoed OpenShift serverless proof of concept invoking Ansible. What does that mean? Well, you can do event-driven automation. Well, isn't that cool, right? I can take events coming in now, and instead of driving, serverless, right? I can still, I can use OpenShift serverless to kick off Python or some other, function. I can now do function as a service where the function is the Ansible playbook, right? So we're building bridges to enable now the community to go, wow, you know what I could do with that? I could do this, this, and this. Yeah. So it's us enabling that community now to say, I've got other ways to invoke automation. What could I do with that? Have at it, community. Go do what you do best. Go automate new things that were really hard to automate before.
Exactly. Yeah. I hate to say it, but this was the first year in quite some time that I wasn't able to make it to Ansible Fest because I was doing things like this, live streaming to the greater Red Hat communities and world. So how was Ansible Fest this year? It was virtual for the first time ever. A lot of work, time, and effort and energy went into it. And, I saw the internal report, but if you want to speak to any of it, I don't know what I can say or not say, but how was Ansible Fest this year?
So look, 2020 was a year of great adaptations, right? Yeah. For all industries, events, everything became virtualized. Red Hat Summit became virtualized. We had a venue picked out for Ansible Fest. We're going to go to San Diego. We had we had all the logistics and everything was all set up, and it was going to be a wonderful thing. Then the world threw us a curveball. Like many other events, we went virtual. We said, we just don't want to have sort of the online version of what we would do at a convention center or hotel with whatever. How can we make it better?
Right.
And so the team, in a typical Ansible way that you'll appreciate, said, how would we do this differently? How would we approach this differently? And then of course we set up, sort of the whole virtual event process. And, we said, well, how many people would show up? You know what I mean? It's virtual, they don't have to travel, but people are busy. And so we set some internal thresholds, and we blew past all of them. I won't tell you what they were. I was sort of teasing the team about, oh, come on, I think there's going to be a lot more interest than that. We had over 30,000 people registered.
That's a lot.
Okay, and more than half those people showed up. A lot of people register for events, and then their schedules change, or they watch it recorded, or whatever it is.
Yeah.
But over half of those people showed up, and we had people register from over 130 countries.
Wow.
Right. It was a global event. We had customers and people presenting technology from a number of different geographies. It was amazing, right? In terms of the amount of interest, I think that's a tell about how important automation is, but specifically Ansible. And I'll make a claim, and people can take it with a grain of salt. I work for a vendor, disclosure, whatever it is. I work for Red Hat.
Yeah.
Ansible, I think, has become or is becoming the de facto automation technology for a lot of reasons.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll tell you why. Based on the growth that we've seen for things like Ansible Fest, if you go to LinkedIn and you search on Ansible,
oh gosh,
you'll find 35, 40,000 job openings that have Ansible either in the title or in the job description.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to places like Indeed and you look at technologies, Ansible's in the top 5 in terms of fastest growing technologies that people want. We talked about the open source contributors. I mean, there's a small army of people that are contributing to Ansible. So by all the numbers, it's really growing. If you look at the domains that we can automate, if you go back 5 years and say, okay, what can you actually automate with Ansible, and then you compare the number of modules and playbooks and roles and all the different things that can be used to automate now, it's an explosion of domains and things that you can automate and the ways that you can invoke automation. And so we're seeing a lot of people that are they're standardizing on Ansible. The other piece that Red Hat has been providing a lot of sort of leadership and content on is the Ansible platform.
Yeah.
What's that? Well, look, automation can be as simple as running a script, right? Every platform provided some scripting tool over the past, 30, 40 years, right? To automate things using some scripting language and stuff like that. Fast forward, now you have Ansible and you have Ansible playbooks. It's awesome. Well, what if I'm a large organization and I've got lots of teams and we want to collaborate?
Right.
Share automation, right? Certify it. If one team builds some awesome automation, wouldn't it be great if all the other teams could find it and use it and rely on it? Oh, and by the way, when that automation gets updated, that they could know and get it and use it, and that people who are like looking at all these systems could figure out, well, what are we automating, right? How is it working? How is it scaling? What's the what's the view on all that stuff? That's part of the platform. And so a lot of the things that Red Hat's been focused on are not. They're hard to do in a community. The community's doesn't coalesce in certain ways around those kind of capabilities. So that's the kind of thing that Red Hat's been really investing in and showing leadership, which is how can we make it so that a very large distributed organization could share automation at a large scale that is reliable, certified, supported, trusted, and give them visibility. We added analytics services and we're adding more so that they can look at the automation and over time be able to understand what automation am I running, what are my, how long, what's the, success rate of that automation? How long does it take? What did I save? What was the sort of the, people displacement by running that automation? How fast am I doing things? How am I scoring? What automation am I using? What are the other people using out there? What's the best way to automate this situation? What are other people doing? By having those kind of analytics, people can make better choices. You do it in your consumer life. You go check reviews. You go see what other people are doing. You want to understand, what your, mileage per gallon is. You want to understand what the, repair record is and what the, track record is. Those are the kind of things that we're going to be extending with Ansible Analytics over time to help people operate these systems and to scale them.
Absolutely. So I'm trying to feed some links to some folks in chat here, just real quick. Yeah, Yeah, someone's asking about the new Kubernetes collection. So that was announced, I think, this week or last week. But I got to find the blog post. So any parting thoughts before we go, Joe? I think we've kind of run through all the questions that I can think of.
Yeah, I would say that there's a lot of folks out there that are familiar with Ansible. I would encourage people, even if you're familiar with Ansible, I would look at what's going on along some of the innovative edges of Ansible, literally the edge, security, some of the new things. Look at where the sort of the new action is, if you will. If you're not familiar with Ansible, it's only a question of time before you're going to run into. If you're in IT, if you're in any kind of organization that has IT, you're going to hear about, see Ansible. It's good for careers. It's good for understanding. And I think then, if you think about composable management, you can think about, like, where would I use automation in this area? How many automation tools do I have? I've got 6, 10, 12. But I get it down to 2, 3, 1. How many teams are doing automation in my environment? I bet you if you really looked inside your organization, you'd find a lot of people who, oh, I'm doing it. I got scripts. I got this. I use this tool. Wrote this thing. Is that the business that you're in? Are you a software company?
Yeah.
Are you doing that, or are you a healthcare company, or are you a financial services company, or are you is that really how you want to spend your time? There's this huge body of work. I would really, if you don't know it, take a look at it. It's a force of nature.
Yes, please check out Ansible.com. There's tons of resources available there. There's also galaxy.ansible.com where you can pick up, all the community contributed collections and playbooks and roles, as well as, just follow Jeff Gerling on Twitter, and, you'll have a wealth of Ansible knowledge just right there. I can't.
Ansible Fest content, I think, is available, right, for folks.
Yeah. All the Fest content's out there. And then, you mentioned LinkedIn, you mentioned, it's a good thing for your career. I credit, 3 pieces of technology for changing my career: Linux, Ansible, and Kubernetes, right? Like, Ansible definitely changed my career completely, right? Like, went from just like sysadmin plugging away at stuff to, like, okay, now you're going to be a DevOps engineer. You're going to do automation at scale. You're going to help us solve these big problems of deployments, faster kind of thing. You're going to be able to detect errors faster. It really did change my career. So I have to credit Ansible for that. So, Joe, thank you very much for joining us. And thank you, everybody, for watching. If you ever have any questions for Joe, let me know and I'll pass them along. And, Joe, thank you very much for keeping Ansible and advancing the management business unit in the way you have. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate talking to you.
All right. You stay safe, everybody, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.